Good morning and afternoon, everyone. We're going to give everyone just about 1 or 2 minutes here and we'll get things started. In the meantime, feel free to grab a coffee, a Danish, or a glass of water. All right, we're going to keep on rolling here while people are joining up on the meeting today. So appreciate everyone joining, especially on a Monday morning here. I did get a couple of questions as we go to kick this thing off. I think one important one is I was asked a couple of times if this was going to be recorded or not. This is actually recorded and it will be live and available to watch after. So for those that may have to step away on a Monday morning or maybe pull away for other incidents or items, this will be made available after the recording is completed. With that, let's go ahead and get started, though, just because we only have about an hour or so here. So, again, I want to thank everyone for joining our session here today, especially on a Monday morning. I'm sure folks are coming back from hopefully a pleasant weekend and not being too swamped. Appreciate everyone joining me here today. My name is Rich Lilly. I am a director of security here at Netrix Global. My focus at Netrix is primarily in anything around the Microsoft security business. So for us, that means professional services. I've helped kind of formulate a lot of our MXDR platform, which is based around Microsoft technologies, many of which we'll be talking about today. And I've been speaking on such topics for probably 15 or 20 years. So this is by no means my first talk or my first presentation. And I definitely look forward to hopefully educating some folks today and having some good conversations over chat. The title of today's webinar is Defend Against Threats with Microsoft MXDR. I recognize that a lot of folks may be coming into today with a variety of different perspectives on what XDR is, what MXDR is, and maybe not understand all what of Microsoft MXDR is. So we are going to do a little bit of kind of ground level setting on what all these terms and what the industry is seeing and some kind of foundational groundwork so that we're not having to jump right in where maybe folks may be uncomfortable. The goal is today for everyone to walk away with a better understanding of what MXDR is, specifically what Microsoft MXDR's solution is, and then how it can be leveraged to protect your organization. So at the top, we're going to start first with what MXDR is here in just about 60 seconds or so, and why it is important. It's a term, again, you'll see thrown out there by Gartner and Forrester, IDC, and many other OEM vendors such as Microsoft and others. After we get through kind of the foundational items, we'll talk specifically about Microsoft 365 Defender, which for many that may or may not know is a suite of products. We're going to not necessarily dive very, very deep in every single one, but talk about more from a platform and how it can help you. And then we're going to talk about Microsoft Sentinel, which kind of rounds out the MXDR story. And again, I'll explain why in just about a minute or so here. And we'll also be going through some demonstration as well. What I will say is if there are any questions throughout the chat, I will be taking a couple of strategic pauses as we go here. So if there are any questions that are in the chat, I will go ahead and try to stop and answer those. If there are any, feel free again to drop any notes for me, and I will try to get to them as we go along here. I'm not an extremely heavy slide presenter, so we're going to keep today pretty light on slides. There's going to be about 16 or 17 slides in total, and we are going to, again, have some good demonstration as well. So let's start with some of the challenges that probably many of the people on today's call face, myself included. We have come a long way. There has been a fairly extreme evolution of enterprise security. And, some would argue that in even the past probably 3 or 4 years, we've kind of gone from, that caveman to, the Gen X, Gen Z, or, walking in with a cell phone and his head down. But let's talk about maybe where different organizations may be today as well. As some of you may be in different positions financially, may have different priorities from a security and posture focused perspective. Let's start kind of with what most folks have probably experienced at least some point in their career. So from an enterprise security perspective, we start with, unfortunately, the prayer method, which is kind of looking at, the fact that we hope something doesn't happen. There's really no tooling and no people and no process that's really going to help us. We're just sitting out there hoping that we are not going to come into the target sites of a nation state threat actor or other type of attacker or ransomware, et cetera. Obviously, this doesn't really do good for really any organization, as hope and prayer doesn't really get you too far from actual action. In many cases, we hope that malicious and catastrophic exposures don't happen, but we can never say that they will not. In many cases, most organizations that I've talked to in this area do it mostly for one reason, and that's budget. A lot of what we help with a lot of organizations with is help kind of restructure and realign with how do they get past just that prayer mentality, at least into what we call the next one, which is reactive. Now, reactive is not bad, but reactive is something that I would say most enterprise organizations I've dealt with over the past 10 or 15 years really kind of started with in their next evolution, which was as something happens, we want to be able to click, quick, and react to to a specific event, a specific incident, or something that is happening. In these cases, reactive is a start of a good measure, but it's not necessarily always going to help us in the long run because we're not really maybe doing anything to help prevent what the next action or the next activity from, say, one of these threat actors or a breach or an actor is going to be. Again, is what this does at least help, and most organizations where they evolve on is at least creating a reactive process, which is a good first step. But by no means is it all the necessary items that you're going to need to help bolster your enterprise security. The third is going to be looking at more proactive. So from a proactive to reactive perspective, proactive is really looking at how do we help identify events even as or before they're occurring. And this may be looking at things like trends or specific response actions, things that we know are repetitively happening within this environment or that environment. In many cases, these patterns or these threats may indicate a specific, actor or may indicate a specific vulnerability. And hopefully we have, from the previous couple of steps, already have that kind of established response plan and that action. But the idea here is that we take it from an action or an event triggering a response to, maybe an analyst or a security team, doing, through proactive means, kicking off those actions. Then we get to probably where most organizations that I talk to now are either trying to get or are at, which is looking at more rule-based detections. In many cases here, we look at different rules and specs and remediations. In many cases, this could be looking at very technical items such as, say, Yara rules, or in the case we'll be talking about, Sentinel analytic rules, to be able to look at these patterns and then be able to potentially take SOAR actions based on that all in kind of one fell swoop. This is really linking together being proactive, being reactive, and then even taking action and then creating outcomes based on this as well. Then we kind of move on to where I would say is the kind of North Star for most organizations these days, especially with the word AI, and ML, so machine learning and et cetera. These are things that are extremely hot in the market right now. I don't think I can have a conversation on any call without hearing the word chat GPT come up. In this case, this is really where the industry is going, is really looking at leveraging further intelligence from different signal and different intelligence and different vendors and source information to really help bolster, enterprise security with an organization. One thing I want to highlight is by no means do I make an assumption here that if every organization gets to this intelligent phase, that they are going to be 100% protected from attack. That's just an unrealistic observation. What it will do is make it harder for attackers to get into your environments and breach or impact your users, et cetera. And this is really where many organizations want to be. And hopefully most of the folks on this call or listening into after the fact are at least moving in the right direction to get to this point. And what we'll talk about today is how a lot of the Microsoft tooling specifically will help in that area as well, and getting more towards that intelligent, the end of that intelligent evolution. And by the way, by no means do I consider intelligent the end of the evolution. I do expect there to probably be more here, and this evolution will continue to grow and mature. I think another challenge when I talk to many security pros or IT pros today is, really just the alphabet soup of acronyms out there today. And this could be said for, every, vendor OEM out there today. But again, I'm going to be using some terminology throughout today's session that I want to make sure is normalized for most folks on this call, because it may mean a little bit different to everyone. So, acronym number one is going to be managed detection response, and what this really focuses on is, having one that stands for managed detection response, and two is it's really about having a 24/7, 365 team that's going to investigate and prioritize and triage, but also conduct proactive and reactive actions. This is critical. You'll hear me referencing MDR and then also probably MXDR mostly today. But MDR is kind of that critical, more process-driven side that's going to be, important for many organizations out there today. NDR. NDR is network detection and response, which is really looking specifically at primarily the network layer or the network communications layer, and then integrating that in with, your security operations center, your MSSP tools, MSP tools, et cetera. One term that's kind of emerged in probably the last 2 to 3 years here or so is XDR. And I know it can be a little bit confusing because I always get asked, what does the X mean? Well, X is actually the X in extended. So extended detection response is really about one thing, and that's integrating a subset of tools with each other so tightly that we can take telemetry and signal and pieces from those different sources and correlate them into a singular detection. In many cases, if this was me 10 years ago, it would have been me, in a manual fashion, or a security analyst in a manual fashion. When I'm looking at a bigger threat, looking at things like, inbound email, tracking that back to an execution on a desktop through a third-party, AV or EDR platform, potentially having to track that back then into a public cloud service for any upload content, maybe then tracing that back to the IPs that are coming in and out of the firewall. That process was typically stitched together by analyst teams. And when we talk about modern XDR, it's really about integrating all these different pieces together. And one thing we'll talk about today that I think really gives Microsoft a leg up in this space, and why we've chosen to partner with them, is because of their tooling and because of how tightly integrated at every single layer that they are, and making sure that when we have a piece of signal from point A, like an IP from a firewall, we can correlate that to an action on an endpoint, all very easily, without having to do have a significant amount of overhead as a part of that process. We now have MXDR as well, which is really this XDR as a managed service, and this is something that certainly Netrix has been doing for many years, but really since the evolution of M365 Defender and Microsoft Sentinel in probably the last 4 years or so, has really allowed us to deliver that MXDR service to our customers, even before it was branded really MXDR. So I hope this really helps everyone from kind of a foundational perspective on some of the different terms. Again, you'll probably hear me refer to each in a little bit today, but most and foremost, you probably hear me refer mostly to XDR and MXDR today. So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft's MXDR offering. This is what I'm an expert in. It's what I can talk about all day. And then I've also helped organizations move from, again, a variety of different tools and agents and services to, a centralized or mostly centralized platform. One of the things that's very interesting, and there's a lot of stats that have been thrown out there recently, so I want to put some together that may be relevant for you all. Microsoft has, by the way, their Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, or MISA. Netrix is a part of MISA, as well as many OEMs and other competitors of ours as well. And this is kind of a central place where kind of authorized vendors and OEMs and security vendors and MSSPs have really kind of gathered together and try to provide a cohesive catalog of solutions. And it's definitely a fantastic program we've been a part of for quite some time. Again, if anyone is here going to RSACon, highly recommend checking out the MISA or the Microsoft security booth there. You'll see me there probably on Thursday. But to kind of get back to specific items that are going to be important to you, one of the things that MXDR offers, Microsoft MXDR solutions offer, is really a consolidation of detection response solutions. One of the challenges that my customers were faced in the past is when I would walk into their doors and have a conversation physically or virtually with them, their biggest challenge was having all these different disparate security tools. They had a SIEM, they may have a security data lake, they may have other information present in other solutions that aren't really brought to one location. One of the things that Microsoft had revealed to everyone in the world in some recent briefings is that over 785,000 organizations use Microsoft security products. Now, this may just be one component, this may be all the components, but really the challenge statement here is that if you are leveraging a singular product, like maybe Defender for endpoint security, or maybe you're leveraging Defender for Office 365 for BEC and mail hygiene, that you already have an integration point into the broad-based Microsoft security tools. To be able to pivot and then bring that data in and link that with other sources like Defender for Cloud or Defender for Identity or Azure Active Directory, et cetera, is really a no-brainer. And many of the folks that may already have access to some of the tools that I just mentioned may have access to some of the sister or brother tools as a part of that as well. And you may not even realize that. For instance, if you're an M365 E3 customer today or an EMS E3 customer today, and you're using it for one product, you actually have access to that likely for many of the other product suite. The same thing with E5 and ME5. Again, today's not meant to be a licensing conversation, but the crux of the conversation around this is really that for those that don't recognize, you may already have access to a lot of these security features and tools. One of the most underrated ones that I always talk about is going to be multi-factor authentication and conditional access. If anyone out there today is leveraging a third-party solution, whether it be, say a Duo or a Okta or others, if you are a Microsoft Azure Active Directory customer today, or you're a Microsoft security customer today, you may already have products in your portfolio or your suite that you own that already have that same function. In many cases, you're kind of dual paying then for solutions that really do mostly the same thing. So use that as an opportunity to sit down and identify where there may be overlap in tools you have today. And especially as you'll hopefully see by the end of the presentation today, with that kind of tightly integrated set of tools, how well all these work and can identify events and incidents sooner within your organization. Another interesting statistic shared with us as well was the centralized management of notifications. So about over 50% of organizations will be using managed detection response services by 2025. You'll see the link there in the bottom there from the stat provided. So there is, really no getting away from this. This is happening. We're seeing the swing in the industry right now of folks wanting to leverage MDR providers. And really 2025 is really not so far around the corner at this point. We're about a year and 3/4 out. This is something that most organizations have to do. Really, getting ahead of, the decision on the tooling and the process and the people is something that, you should be starting now if you really haven't thought about where that's going to land within your organization. The other thing that I'll call out is MDR services also really focus in on robust rules and governance. So again, partners like Netrix do offer these as services as well. So maybe you're a lean or a small IT organization, you just don't have the capacity for running a full security operations center. Or maybe you don't have the expertise in some of the Microsoft security tooling or incident or breach response, et cetera. In many cases here, this is where Netrix can step in to assist you. And we'll talk a little about this more at the end. This is something unique that, especially in the Microsoft security space, Netrix is one of the first into markets with this, and have been doing this probably the longest. The other thing as well is looking at security team efficiency. So one of the challenges that I talked about a second ago was that most organizations may not have that people, the process, the tooling, et cetera. One of the other things that Netrix can help do as well is help bolster existing security teams where they may not have, say, follow the sun coverage, or they may not have the full expertise. So in many cases, it's not just about us coming in and replacing a team. It's also about supplementing a team that may already exist as well. And because, again, Netrix is admitted one of the first into this program late last year, and we've been doing it for much longer, obviously, this just became formalized. This is something that we feel like we have a good leg up on a lot of our competitors, and can certainly help assist with your organization's efforts in moving towards further security as well. So let's talk a bit about the Microsoft portfolio, because this can be a little bit confusing when I talk to customers today, and just understanding what pieces play what parts of overall MXDR. So one is, I want to start kind of in the middle and work our way out here. So in the middle left here, you've got M365 Defender, which M365 Defender has components that really touch every component of what we call the attack kill chain. And for those that aren't familiar with the attack kill chain, feel free to go look it up. There'll be plenty of references out there if you go Bing it, or ask ChatGPT if you want to. From a M365 Defender perspective, though, there's a couple of major focus areas. And again, for you today as an organization, this may represent maybe even different tools or vendor solutions. But on the Microsoft side, Defender for Identity is a component that's corely focused in on managing threats against Active Directory and Azure Active Directory for that matter. And this is looking at things like domain controller logs and packet inspection, abnormal logins, UEBA, to identify potentially malicious or odd or abnormal user behavior. This is really a key part of their core set of identity management, identity security platform. The second is Defender for Endpoint. For those that may be familiar with, I'll say traditional AV and EDR products, Microsoft's answer to this, released many years ago at this point, called Defender for Endpoint, has both a AV and an EDR component. And I think one of the things I'm not going to dig deep into each one of these bullets, but one of the call-outs that I will make on the endpoint side that typically gets overlooked is that people don't recognize that when I talk to them that Defender for Endpoint can cover not only Windows platforms, but non-Windows platforms as well. And this is a common misconception around Microsoft's investment, where they've only invested in their platforms. Absolutely not the case. You'll see, heavy investment in other platforms in areas such as mobile and Mac OS, et cetera. But what I do want to call in the Defender for Endpoint perspective is this is looking at covering Windows endpoints, Mac OS points, Linux endpoints, Windows servers, Linux servers, mobile devices like iOS and Android, and even IoT. There's an extensive pool of endpoint solutions this protects, not just talking Microsoft endpoint, which again, something I hear often. The third one is really around the application protection. So this would fall more into things like application single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, zero trust. And the technologies that fall under this is really, primarily things like conditional access and some of the policies that go into protecting your enterprise applications. Again, if you're leveraging Azure Active Directory today, if you're leveraging Office 365, it's likely you also have some other applications like Salesforce or ServiceNow or others that may be integrated there as well. Something that, again, comes out of the box, and even in some cases, that single sign-on, depending on your licensing, comes along for free as a part of that as well. We also have email and documents as well. So I talked a little bit earlier about MDO, which is Defender for Office 365, which is really the BEC and mail hygiene solution. Again, if you leveraged what used to be called ATP in the past, this is really, MDO is really the modern name for that today. Again, looking at preventing, things like bulk and spam and, malicious inbound email, et cetera, et cetera. Cloud applications really focused in on your cloud SaaS applications. So think SAML, think OIDC. The solution under this portfolio specifically is called Defender for Cloud Apps. So this used to be called Cloud App Security. Previous to that was Adallam or Adalam, which was a CASB solution. But again, looking at kind of filling that void of making sure your cloud applications are protected as a part of that as well. And then recently, there have also been some announcements about Defender for IoT, which I believe was actually GA'd last week after another acquisition about a couple of years ago as well. But really the important part here is that all these different pieces really play into having visibility into every part of the attack kill chain. And one of the most important parts, as we'll get into in the demonstration here in just a few minutes, is that Microsoft's solutions, in this case, M365 Defender, will try to stitch together incidents across all these different attack story items. And that's really where a lot of the value comes in having, a singular or unified platform from a XDR perspective. I will call out that in addition to the M365 Defender suite, we're not going to be going into it as deep as today, but Microsoft also bolsters the rest of their enterprise security portfolio with a solution called Defender for Cloud. This is corely focused in on primarily Azure, but also has some hybrid or on-premises use cases as well. So whether it be on-prem SQL or SQL in the cloud or virtual machines or containers, network, et cetera, you see some of the services listed there. These two pieces together really allow for, full, an XDR for, an entire hybrid workforce, a hybrid security platform. Now, all of that does make up XDR. Really what stitches and brings this all together is Microsoft Sentinel. So we're going to kind of go up to this next lighter, larger rectangle box. Now, one of the other most common questions I get goes something like this. Rich, I have all the Microsoft products. I maybe also have a competitive SIM solution, maybe like a Splunk or a Logarithm, Exabeam, QRadar, et cetera. What is the value to me even having to need a SIM solution anymore? Or what is the value of me having content all in one place within in Sentinel itself? So one kind of myth I wanted to dispel is that if I have M365 Defender, that is a SIM. One thing that is I hear probably in about 40 to 50% of my conversations that question being asked. And the answer to that is no, it's not actually a SIM solution, because M365 Defender does have a purpose, and its purpose is primarily correlating different entities like user or file or computer or cloud app or service, et cetera, in one place within the Microsoft portfolio. One of the things that M365 Defender itself doesn't natively do is integrate with other third-party solutions. And that's really where Sentinel comes into the picture. So where M365 Defender can kind of cohabitate with its own Defender products, what Sentinel allows us to do is take those data points out from M365 Defender and even other Microsoft solutions like Azure Active Directory and Azure Activity Logs and audit logs, et cetera, and also correlate all of that with non-Microsoft data, like your firewall logs, like your Salesforce access logs, such as your ServiceNow sign-in details. Again, some of these things may not be present depending on your configurations or the security tools you use today. So Sentinel is really about taking not only Defender's components and making them talk and integrate with each other, but also integrating that with telemetry and signal from other third-party solutions. So if there's one, number one big item you can take away today is that M365 Defender is really purpose-built, on kind of the core Microsoft set of security products. Sentinel allows us to expand that out and bring in other signal and intel from other solutions, which is, again, requirement. And that really does offer, that really is a SIM, a SIM and source solution. Now, taking it up one more level is we have verified MXDR solution, which is really where Netrix comes into play. So for us, our MXDR solution being managing XDR, so all of these solutions in one, is really us managing a customer's SIM or MSS, environment as an MSSP. So when those alerts come in at 3 a.m, or when a multi-stage attack hitting, 3 of those different blue boxes on the left comes in and your analysts aren't sure what to do because they can't understand the process or what happened, that's where someone like a Netrix comes in. And that's really where, MXDR comes into play. So hopefully that at least gives everyone an idea of how the different Microsoft pieces fit into different parts of the portfolio. Again, in quick summary, just because I talked about it quite a bit there, M365 Defender, and plus Defender for Cloud, really at kind of that XDR, level. Again, really well integrating with other Defender-centric solutions and products. Take that up a level, you've got Sentinel as well. When you add that on, again, allows us to integrate with third-party solutions and Signal. And then obviously, someone like a Netrix sits at top there with MXDR, where we manage a lot of this for you or your organization, or even co-manage it with you or your organization as well. So let's dig a little bit more into the Defender solutions. Specifically, we're going to talk about product names because some of the pieces, again, are not as clear for many of the customers I work with and what each one of them do. So, and again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just go really quickly. Defender for Endpoint, again, that's the AV and EDR solution. Again, not just Microsoft, third party. Defender for Office 365 is a mail hygiene BEC. So again, inbound, outbound, spam, BCL, obviously threat, safe links, safe attachments for those that are familiar. All of those fall under that MDO side, or Defender for Office 365. Defender for Identity, again, focused corely on Active Directory and even in some cases Azure Active Directory. Cloud apps, focusing on most of your SaaS applications, which I talked about earlier. There are some other components as well that do kind of play key roles in this as well, if you have or own them. One of them is Defender Vulnerability Management, which is fairly new. Defender for Vulnerability Management is a subcomponent of Defender for Endpoint. There are a lot of capabilities. I'm not going to get into them today that look at things like, what patches are applied, what are the security configurations. There's even new things that have been launched in recent months around external threats as well. Again, things we're not going to necessarily be able to get into deep today, but just for everyone's awareness, they do exist. There's also Azure Active Directory identity protection focused in on like user risk, session risk, endpoint data loss prevention, which Microsoft entered the market over a year ago on this, built into Windows now and even available for things like Mac OS. And then also application governance, looking at the riskiness of applications, persistent privileges, et cetera. Again, the key reason why I call a lot of this out is I think a lot of folks, when I talk to them, have specifically looked at one of those point pieces to replace a product they have today. And one of the benefits of having, a broader XDR platform is really having tools that integrate well together. And certainly this represents an opportunity for you as an organization to bring in some of these other tools into your environment. Next, we'll talk about detection prevention. So from a detection prevention perspective, I've talked a little bit about the importance of how all these tools integrate together. And when we talk about the integration, a lot of that does come in through what we'll call the M365 Defender portal. Again, when I refer to, say, a multi-stage incident, a multi-stage incident may be a compromised user logs in from a bad location, from a new virtual machine and a new ISP, and they may send a compromised email and then execute something on an endpoint. This, when we refer that back to what an attack kill chain is, really touches multiple different components. In many cases, this may require that in the past, an analyst individually identifies and links these events together. The intent and the hope is, in many cases, M365 Defender, by looking at a common user signal and data from an endpoint and data from cloud apps, is that some of this effort or much of this effort can be automatically stitched together as a part of that process. And that's really where that reduction of effort, that optimization comes into play, and also allows you to create kind of a full attack timeline or a story across what happened during the course of that event. To give you a very common one, for instance, maybe someone has left port 80 open on a web server that has a PHP vulnerability. Someone has gotten in through that PHP vulnerability. They've launched a attack over them the LAN because it wasn't set up properly or secured properly, excuse me. And then that is then kicked off a ransomware event on someone's machine, which then persisted to 15 other machines. This has traversed not only identity, but it's traversed the edge, traversed the endpoint, and even traversed email, like I said, through other forms like I mentioned as well. In many cases, this gives us an opportunity to protect and allow us to join all these events together. Okay, next we'll talk about notifications and security team enablement. So again, the intent here is that we can also link actions directly back to this as well. In many cases for M365 Defender, this allows us to take action directly within the portal. When we talk about tools like Sentinel, it even allows us to kick over into playbooks, which we'll talk about and showcase a little bit today. That gives us an opportunity then to even automatically remediate things as a part of that as well. Again, this kind of just extends some of the additional capabilities. So again, we've got M365 Defender solutions. I talked about most of these today, so we'll kind of go directly past this. And then we're going to kick over into a slight demonstration. And I recognize we're running a little bit over here, so I will try to crank through what I can here today. And for those that can stay on, great. The recording should continue to go as well here. So just really quickly, I want to take the moment to provide a pretty quick demonstration of what this looks like live. So this is M365 Defender. I don't have any open incidents in this tenant, so we'll go ahead and look at all of our open previous cases. And really what I'm looking for here is, some of the different types of attacks. And you'll see in, the different types of events that have executed here, the severity of them, the investigation state, the solution. What I really want to look at is, one of these that may cross multiple different services. So we've got some Defender for Endpoint here. We've got some identity protection. We don't have a lot that cross many. Let's go up and pick up one of our endpoint events here. So this is an example of a blocked network protection event on one endpoint. So if we go up and open up this incident, a couple of things we'll see from an incident handling perspective are going to be pretty important, and they're all going to be kind of laid out right here fairly easily. One of those is going to be in the middle here, kind of a picture of what that attack timeline looks like. We can even go ahead over here and play, what that attack looks like from start to finish. It's a fairly simple one, so really not much to see there. We can also see how many alerts have been associated with this incident, which could certainly be more than one. And then any assets as a part of this as well, such as the user's machine, the user, the mailbox, the applications, and then even the evidence that is a part of this as well. So this site looks like it may be a similarly named registered site out there today. And then the beauty of this as well is we can work this incident in M365 Defender. We can bring it over to Sentinel. We can take action. This really allows us in one place to bring these all events together. And the important part too, why I want to bring the portal up mostly, is to say, when we do know a URL for an endpoint, we can correlate that back to a proxy log or a website through a proxy access or through a firewall, et cetera. This is really what a lot of the correlation is happening behind the scenes and what is super important as a part of that as well. Again, just because of time, we'll kick back over to the presentation here. So let's dig for a few minutes here into Microsoft Sentinel. So Microsoft Sentinel, I've kind of already given a background of really where Sentinel sits in. But first of all, what is Microsoft Sentinel? Microsoft Sentinel is a SIEM and SOAR solution. So again, if you look at the likes of, your Splunk and Logarithm and ArcSight and others out there today, those are, really where Microsoft Sentinel comes into play. And Sentinel's been around for about 4 or 5 years now. But now if you go look at, some of the Gartner, IDC, and other reports today, you'll see them ranked as one of the highest out there. The SOAR side, I really haven't talked much about today, and we won't go deeply into today, but it's really the reaction or action side of a cloud native SIEM solution. When we see an event kick over from this point, we'll automatically take this action. When we see a malicious login from Russia, that was a valid login from a non-corporate asset for a user, we may then take this action, which could be disable the account or reset the password, revoke the access tokens, things that mostly someone would have had to done manually in the past. What Sentinel allows us to do in this case is not only taking that intelligence from M365 Defender, but then also other third-party solutions, and even take action on some of those solutions as well. Maybe create a ACL, or maybe go ahead and revoke user consent or access. This is really what Sentinel is about, and really what allows us to interact heavily within a organization's environment. So where do we start with Sentinel? Again, this can be a multi-step process, but how do we make this easy for you? One is we want to look at where do we ingest the data from. Microsoft to Microsoft is by far the easiest. It's usually one click, if any clicks at all. Some cases they're automatically plumbed depending on how you deploy. But bringing in M365 Defender, bringing in Azure Active Directory, Office 365 logs is about easy as you would expect. It's a one click with the right permissions, and that data starts to get brought in within about 15 minutes. There's also obviously Azure service sources. So again, Azure Activity and Audit and other solutions like Azure SQL, et cetera. And then there's also third-party solutions that come in through APIs, through RESTful connectors, et cetera. This really allows us to bring in all these different solutions into one place. And I'll very quickly in a minute here show you an example of what that list looks like. Workbooks really allow us to visualize and provide insights into the different solutions. So these really allow us to look at trends over time and flagged events. Really consider these kind of like active and living dashboards of the different solutions. And then we have our analytic and alert rules, which are really looking at how do we again go back to that rule-based kind of evolution that I talked about earlier today to identify these events, and then ideally take SOAR actions on some of these as a part of it as well. After kind of those core components, we get most customers stood up. It's really then about orchestrating those common events, looking at integrating different solutions that they may not have integrated into their SIEM or SOAR platforms today, leveraging some of the capabilities around proactive hunting that are built in to Sentinel as well. And then there's such a massive amount of community content being delivered right now. It's insane. So there's continued opportunity for us to leverage that, and even for folks like Netrix to provide our own curated content to you as well. Just due to time, I'm not going to really get much to the demonstration, so I'm going to really just show two quick things within the portal I think are going to be important for everyone here today. One of the things, again, it is probably the most common question I get asked is that does Microsoft Sentinel only protect Microsoft things? That answer is exclusively no. It does expand multiple different vendors, solutions, OEMs, and even third-party non delivered APIs from Microsoft today, meaning third-party solutions that are offered by them, not Microsoft. You can see just an example of all the different ones that are listed in this provider section today. These really represent what are the plumbing of Sentinel. And again, you can see here, I mean, a vast majority is not Microsoft in here. So again, whether it's a Sophos, whether it's an Nginx, whether it's, a abnormal security, Cisco, et cetera, the goal is to bring and correlate these different entities and informations with things like M365 Defender. And that's really the role that in this case, Sentinel plays. Now, to give you one other example while we're in here today, this is an example of what an event in Sentinel looks like. So again, I'm not going to be able to go super deep in this today, but again, we got a whole bunch of details in one place. We can work the event, add a comment. We can even do things like run a playbook directly out of this, like, ACL that IP or remove that user and trigger an investigation, et cetera. There's just a whole slew of information we can do in here. And again, today's not meant to be a deep dive, just more of an introduction. So really quickly, just back to a couple of quick slides here, and we'll go ahead and wrap things up. So this is certainly not our first foray into Microsoft security. I've personally been working in Microsoft security for 20 plus years. Where Netrix has really stepped in to assist our customer bases in a lot of the areas we've talked about today. One of the best things we're known for today is really deploying of the M365 security solutions and services. So this is done by my professional services team to either A, implement a new solution, B, replace a legacy or competitive solution, or there's usually not a C. Usually C is we're either implementing or replacing something. Very, very little are we actually doing net new implementations of, say, an AV solution these days. We're almost always replacing Symantec, Broadcom, Trend Micro, et cetera, others. The other area where we can assist as well is, and you see one of our case studies in here, is our managed detection response service. So I've talked about MXDR ad nauseum now. It's really about managing these events for our customers so they have peace of mind in the middle of the night that an incident is being handled, that we're taking action on these different items and being proactive. That's really our secret sauce, in addition to implementing, that we provide to our customers today. So I know today's gone fairly quick, and I know I've gone a bit over time. So just a couple of closing thoughts anchoring back to our first kind of introduction slide. One is, hopefully everyone walks away today with at least a little bit of a deeper understanding of the Microsoft Defender security solutions. If you are using one or using none or even own some but aren't using some today, sit down and look at where you may have overlap in some of the different toolings. A lot of times we'll even assist with this and assisting with doing kind of a gap analysis. And then kind of helping build that vision and that strategy moving forward. And I'll talk about this in just a second, is critical. If there is overlap, obviously, where you already dual own a solution from Microsoft or a third-party vendor today, why not look at reducing that cost? I think everyone's kind of, trying to recession-proof themselves. So let's identify where we can pull out duplicative costs. We can assist with, again, moving to the Microsoft solutions in that area. Try to bring everything to a unified platform. Again, we hope that it is going to be M365 Defender and Sentinel. Recognize that may not, be the case for everyone, but again, bringing that all into a unified platform in place is critical, and it will make lives easier, and it will make investigations easier as well. Will it guarantee that you do not have a breach? Again, no, I can never personally state that, but these will help, with the investigation and even like proactiveness of some of the events in your environment. Certainly review Microsoft Sentinel. These are conversations I have almost daily. There are free, quote unquote, free tiers of Sentinel. If you are an M365 E5 customer today, you even have some cost offset for your licensing. I believe that offer is still going on. And there's even some free data ingestion caps that Microsoft allows for things like Office 365 and others. So please go investigate those or reach out to your Netrix rep to have a discussion with our technical team. And that brings me to our last point of this slide, which is feel free to contact us. We are the experts in this area. This is something that, again, I've personally been doing, our team's been doing for quite a long time. We are here to help guide you towards the right direction. So don't be afraid to reach out to our alias, to your Netrix rep to help with identifying, how we can help you move in towards that MXDR journey. And again, where we look at is really a couple of key areas. So one is, I've talked about where we can help guide, which is kind of that, situational analysis, where are things today, gap analysis, create ultimately a design out of that, execute that design, and hopefully, we help and assist with managing and operating that moving forward, putting your organization in a better overall position. So, this is really our mantra. It's what we follow on our customer journey for every customer. And we really hope that we can assist you with that as well. With that, we are at the end of the presentation today. There is going to be an attachment with some additional information, a link to this as well. I don't see any additional questions that I haven't already answered throughout the discussion today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and thank everyone for their time, especially on a Monday morning/afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. And look forward to hopefully talking with some of you in the future. And I hope this was really helpful for everyone. So with that, have a great rest of your week and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks and take care.